love Christmas music, and it was good to see everyone, wasn't it? That was a special treat of being able to see these videos. Well, this is our second Sunday in December and our third Advent Sunday, which is love. And so what I'm going to be looking at, my title, The Light of Love. And I begin with a scriptural passage. This is Matthew chapter 5, verse 16. Let your light shine before others. This small sentence says so much. Let your light shine before others. This is how we can be the presence of love, and letting our light shine is a valuable part of our journey of recognizing that Christ's light burns within us, is always the fuel for us to add help, assistance, a smile, writing letters, sending cards, making calls, letting our light shine before others. I love this community for how it does continue, no matter what the global pandemic is. There's so much expression of love through our spirit groups, through our engagement in classes or in Facebook. It's what a blessing this is. Now, I am continuing to use the value of this wonderful Advent booklet, The Spirit of Christmas, that Unity puts out every year. This year, just like others, is very special. Now, from Tuesday in The Spirit of Christmas, Reverend Richard and Mary Astrofola. Now, they wrote some wonderful prayers about vision, about prayer, and they say this: has it ever occurred to you that a candle does not lose any of its power and brilliance by lighting another candle? Its ability to share its brilliance is limited only by the length of time it can stay lit. When Jesus said in Matthew 5:14, "You are the light of the world," he did so with the knowledge that we have an inner source of light, the inner Christ. Now, I love this metaphor because, as you know, we light these Advent candles as a representation of lighting that light within us. And it is a significant truth that whenever our light is shining, or a candle's light is shining, by lighting another candle, by being another light before others, it doesn't dim any of the light that any of us are sharing. It just adds to it. A cumulative sharing of light. Now, the light of love is a deep, courageous journey. And I say courageous because, well, let's go to this next quote. John 13:34. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. Now, this is really easy when we're looking to love our children, our grandchildren, our nieces, our nephews, our partners, our shared family love. But this commandment requires us to love everyone, to turn on that light and send that light to those we might have challenge with. Maybe it's someone we've never met, but we have an opinion about them. It's ours to turn on that light, to turn within, because we have this ever-present divine light within us. And of course, God is unchanging. The light is unchanging. We always have that available to us. Now, even in those times of strife or challenge, judgment, sadness, or anger, we can still turn on our light of love. And even in the darkest place, you light a candle. You light the candle of love, it's no longer dark. We can be busy with that thinking of just why they have been wrong for so long. But even with that, we can love ourselves, and we can love anyone by seeing the spark of love in them. I love the light of love in you, in you, in you, in you, in you, in them. That takes courage. There is nothing about the journey of Advent that's for the weak of heart, or the being reticent, holding back, keeping it all within us. This is our time to step in, because we can read here. This is a commandment from our master teacher, saying to love one another. He also said the most important thing is to love God with all your heart and soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, if you're not loving yourself very much, at least you love your neighbor that much. All we need is a little light of love, and it can open an avalanche of love, because the light of love always burns. I turned to Reverend Elizabeth Longo. I love Elizabeth. I can call her friend. She used to be the former minister at Unity of the Keys in Florida, and now she's a life coach and a very inspirational speaker. And she wrote in our Spirit of Christmas booklet, she says, this Christmas, allow the transformative power of love to renew your spirit. Be willing to forgive. Release all that no longer serving you. Tear down the walls of separation. Dive deep into your heart. Then share the light of love with the entire world. This is why we need to face this with great courage, because we will be transformed by the power of love. It happens every Christmas. We be a little more caring, bringing our food for the food bank, or sending off checks to help people who are in need. The power of love renews all things. And within that renewal and healing gives us the opportunity to be able to forgive, to let go of our judgment, to open our heart to truly experience a deep love for everyone. Now, I can share with you that there are times when I experience anger or grief or loneliness. And when I'm feeling those feelings, I'm not feeling really loving towards myself or anyone else. But it doesn't take me long to remember that all I need do is to stop to breathe and to choose differently, to look at something other than the thoughts whirling in my mind, to pay attention to the signals that come from my heart. Now, in the human journey, there's many examples of how our heart has been changed by a simple attitude of choosing love over fear. Out of embracing a common enemy, where just prior to that, we couldn't fathom the ability to choose the light of love. And so I hope you'll enjoy this video from the Unity Chamber readers reading The Christmas Truce by Shepard. Now, this is a story based on what happened in the midst of World War I in Christmas Eve, 1914.
We are the Unity Chamber readers, and we are delighted to share with you now this true story based on extraordinary incidents between the British and German soldiers while stationed on the front line in France during World War I on Christmas Eve 1914. We offer this reader's theater, which is titled The Christmas Truce by Shepard. I would like to introduce to you our cast. This is Gary playing Andrew, Quentin playing Philip, Leslie playing Tom, and I'm Maggie playing John. Christmas Day, 1914. Dear Mother.
My darling Meg.
My good friend, Charles.
My dear sister, Janet.
It's 2 a.m, and most of our men are asleep in their dugout.
Yet I could not sleep myself before writing to you of the wonderful events of Christmas Eve.
In truth, what happened seems almost like a fairy tale. And if I hadn't been through it myself, I would scarce believe it.
Just imagine, while you and the family sang carols before the fire there in London, I did the same with enemy soldiers here on the battlefield of France.
As I wrote before, there has been little serious fighting as of late. The first battles of the war left so many dead that both sides have held back until replacements could come from home. So we have mostly stayed in our trenches and waited.
But what a terrible waiting it's been, knowing that any moment an artillery shell might land and explode beside us in the trench, killing or maiming several men. And in the daylight, not daring to lift our heads above ground for fear of a sniper's bullet.
And the rain. It's fallen almost daily. Of course, it collects right in our trenches, where we have to bail it out with pots and pans. And with the rain comes the mud, a good foot or so deep.
It splatters and cakes everything and constantly sucks at our boots. One new recruit got his feet stuck in it, and then his hands too when he tried to get out, just like in that American story of the tar baby.
Through all of this, we couldn't help but feel curious about the German soldiers across the way. After all, they faced the same dangers we did and slugged about in the same muck.
What's more, their first trench was only 50 yards from ours. Between us lay no man's land, bordered on both sides by barbed wire, yet they were close enough, sometimes we heard their voices.
Of course, we hated them when they killed our friends, but other times we joked about them and almost felt we had something in common.
And now it seems they felt the same.
Just yesterday morning, Christmas Eve day, we had our first good freeze. Cold as we were, we welcomed it because at least the mud froze solid.
Everything was tinged white with frost, while a bright sun shone over all. Perfect Christmas weather.
During the day, there was little shelling or rifle fire from either side, and as darkness fell on our Christmas Eve, the shooting stopped entirely.
Our first complete silence in months. We hoped it might promise a peaceful holiday, but we didn't count on it. We'd been told the Germans might attack and try to catch us off guard.
I went to the dugout to rest, and while lying on my cot, I must have drifted to sleep. All at once, my friend was shaking me awake, saying, "Come and see! See what the Germans are doing!" So I grabbed my rifle and I stumbled out of the trench and stuck my head cautiously above the sandbags.
I never hoped to see a stranger in more lovely sight. Clusters of tiny lights were shining all along the German line, left and right, as far as the eye could see.
"What is it?" I asked in bewilderment. And someone answered, "Christmas trees."
And so it was. The Germans had placed Christmas trees in front of their trenches, lit by candle or lantern like beacons of goodwill.
And then we heard it, their voices raised in song, singing, "Silent night, silent night."
This carol may not be as familiar to us in Britain, but one of the soldiers knew it and translated. Silent night, holy night. I've never heard one more lovelier or more meaningful in that quiet, clear night. Its dark softened by a first quarter moon.
When the song finished, the men in our trenches applauded. Yes, British soldiers applauding Germans.
Then one of our own men started singing, and we all joined in.
The first Noel, the angel did say.
In truth, we sounded not nearly as good as the Germans with their fine harmonies, but they responded with an enthusiastic applause of their own, and then began another. O Tannenbaum, O Tannenbaum.
And then we replied singing, O come, all ye faithful.
But this time they joined in, singing the words in Latin.
Adeste fideles.
British and German harmonizing across no man's land. I would have thought nothing could be more amazing, but what came next was more so.
"English, come over," we heard one of them shout. "You know shoot, we know shoot."
There in the trenches, we looked at each other in bewilderment. Then one of us shouted jokingly, "You come over here!"
To our astonishment, we saw two figures rise from the trench, climb over their barbed wire, and advance unprotected across no man's land.
One of them called, "Send officer to talk."
I saw one of our men lift his rifle to the ready, and no doubt others did the same. But our captain called out, "Hold your fire!" Then he climbed out and went to meet the Germans halfway.
We heard them talking, and a few minutes later, the captain came back with a German cigar in his mouth. "We've agreed there will be no shooting before midnight tomorrow," he announced, "but sentries are to remain on duty, and the rest of you stay alert."
Across the way, we could make out groups of 2 or 3 men starting out of trenches and coming towards us.
Then some of us were climbing out too, and in minutes more, there we were in no man's land. Over 100 soldiers and officers of each side, shaking hands with men we'd been trying to kill just hours earlier.
Before long, a bonfire was built, and around it we mingled, British khaki and German gray. I must say, the Germans were better dressed in their fresh uniforms for the holidays.
Only a couple of our men knew German, but more of the Germans knew English. I asked one of them why that was. "Because many have worked in England," he said. "Before all this, I was a waiter at Hotel Cecil. Perhaps I waited on your table." "Perhaps you did," I said, laughing.
One German told me he had a girlfriend in London and that the war had interrupted their plans for marriage. I said, "Don't worry, we'll have you beat by Easter. Then you can come back and marry the girl." He laughed at that. Then he asked me if I'd send her a postcard he'd give me later, and I promised I would.
Another German had been a porter at Victoria Station. He showed me a picture of his family back in Munich. His elder sister was so lovely. I told him that I would like to meet her someday. He beamed and said that he would like that very much, and he gave me his family's address.
Even those who could not converse still exchanged gifts. Our cigarettes for their cigars, our tea for their coffee, our corned beef for their sausage. Badges and buttons from uniforms changed owners, and one of our lads walked off with the infamous spiked helmet.
I myself traded a jackknife for a leather equipment belt, a fine souvenir to show when I get home.
Newspapers too changed hands, and the Germans howled at laughter with ours. They assured us that France was finished and Russia nearly beaten too.
We told them that was nonsense. And one of them said, well, you believe your newspapers, and we'll believe ours.
Clearly, they are lied to. Yet, after meeting these men, I wonder how truthful our own newspapers have been.
These are not the savage barbarians we've read so much about. They are men with homes and families, hopes and fears, principles, and yes, love of country.
In other words, men like ourselves.
Why are we led to believe otherwise?
As it grew late, a few more songs were traded around the fire, and then all joined in for, and I'm not lying to you, Auld Lang Syne.
Then we parted with promises to meet again tomorrow.
And even some talk of a football match.
I was just starting back to the trenches when an older German clutched my arm. My God, he said, why cannot we have peace and all go home? I told him gently that you must ask your emperor. And he looked at me then searchingly. Perhaps, my friend, but we also must ask our hearts.
And so, dear mother,
Dear wife,
Dear friend,
Dear sister,
tell me, has there ever been such a Christmas Eve in all history?
and what does it all mean, this impossible befriending of enemies?
for the fighting here, of course, it means regrettably little. Decent fellows those soldiers may be, but they follow orders and we do the same.
besides, we are here to stop their army and send it home, and never could we shirk that duty.
Still, one cannot help but imagine what would happen if the spirit shown here were caught by the nations of the world.
Of course, disputes must always arise.
But what if our leaders were to offer well wishes in place of warnings?
Songs in place of slurs.
Presents instead of reprisals.
Would not all war end at once?
All nations say they want peace.
Yet on this Christmas morning, I wonder if we want it quite enough.
Yours truly,
Yours always,
Sincerely,
With all my love,
John.
Andrew.
Philip.
Tom.
It's wonderful to revisit that story, and it's so compelling. It touches the heart, and that's where our journey of Advent resides. In closing this talk, I turn to the wisdom of Reverend Margaret Flick, minister at Unity of Santa Rosa, California. Speaking words of love may be easy, but expressing love through action is following the path of Jesus. We work to move beyond being loving to being love itself. We radiate love to all of creation with compassionate and open hearts. We turn to the master teacher, Jesus, our way shower. Jesus embodied the full radiance of that enlightened spirit. And as we choose to follow in those steps, it's ours not just to be loving, but to step into being love. And the only way we can do that is to share our light of love, to be love in action. Just like those soldiers and officers on the front line in 1914 chose love in action, chose to look beyond the differences and to identify with the similarity. We have much to do in this time of this holiday season, this global global pandemic and any challenge that's in our life. But if we step into lighting our love, we can be love in action, being a little more caring, a little more forgiving, a little more of being the advent of faith, of peace, of love, and allowing that to transform our world. I so appreciate this community that knows that we are here to be, act, and live as our master teacher Jesus. And within that knowing, we are lighting our love and being right now a compassionate servant to what needs to happen. And part of that is wearing a mask. Part of that is being grateful. Part of that is extending our heart to those who might be isolated or alone. Part of that is being a bright, brilliant, holy child of God, no matter what.
Step out on the